thank you very much, everybody, for joining this morning. We have a wonderful guest speaker in Mike Register from St. John's Water Management District. I thought we would start first with just kind of going around the horn and everybody introducing themselves. We haven't done that in a while, and I think just the way that the meetings have kind of gone recently and the fact that we're virtual, it might be really helpful just for everybody to say hello. I understand if you can't turn your camera on, that's okay. Just a good hello, where you're from and what's going on would be super helpful. So I'll get us kicked off. Chris Snow, I'm with Sunshine Water Services, formerly known as the artist formerly known as Utilities Inc. of Florida. We are excited to have rebranded as of January 1st and excited to be here this Friday morning. Dan, would you go next?
Sure. Dan Lopez, owner of Legends Realty, past chair of this committee from last year. We have not gone through a rebranding, so.
Maribel?
I am Maribel Casada. I am the president and owner of Two Bells Cafe Co. And I just relocated here from Chicago back in late April and started operations on the 1st of May. So I have gone a rebranding.
New brand. Welcome.
Yes.
Kyle?
Hi, Kyle Alexander, Orlando Regional Realtors Association, Vice President of Public Policy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kyle. Vice Chair. Elizabeth, thank you very much for joining this morning.
Hi, it's my pleasure. I'm Elizabeth Watkins. I'm the Senior Manager for Government Relations for Walt Disney World, as you can see.
I like your Zoom background.
Not shy about branding.
No, you shouldn't be. If you got a good Zoom background, might as well use it. Thank you.
Oh, did we lose Chris? I think we lost Chris.
I'm sure he'll be back.
All right.
Alan, you want to go next?
Sure. Sorry, I can't be on camera. I'm actually driving right now, but Alan Rickelfort, Senior Manager with MSL CPAs and Advisors.
Awesome. Drive safe. Zach, you want to go next?
Hey guys, it's Zach Hoover, State and Federal Government Affairs and Public Policy for Orlando Health. We're a nonprofit hospital system based in Central Florida.
Well, thank you very much for continuing without me.
Trying to keep the wheels moving.
I don't know what is going on. Zoom, for whatever reason, Zoom asks me like every 5 seconds, do you want to leave the meeting? Do you want to leave the meeting? Do you want to leave the meeting? So whenever I get ready to mute, it'll throw up the leave meeting button wherever I seem to click. And so I just accidentally hit the leave meeting. Adam, thank you very much for joining us. Adam's from St. John's Water Management District and is an old friend in the legislative process. So Adam, would you just introduce yourself, please?
Yep. Hey, good morning. Adam Lovejoy, Government Affairs for St. John's. So
thank you.
Happy Friday.
Well, thank you very much for joining. And Mike, it's absolutely a pleasure to have you join us this morning. Mike is the Executive Director of the St. John's Water Management District and has been at the agency since 1990. Took over for, oh my gosh, I'm blanking now, for Dr. Ann Shortell, September, Mike, is that right?
Yes, September.
Yeah, so Mike oversaw the surface water and groundwater modeling and water supply planning. And St. John's Water Management District is just so important to what all of us do each and every day, and kind of planning for water usage and knowing where we should be and forecasting the future. So we're excited to hear, Mike, what's going on with St. John's and how we can be helpful to you.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for having me here. I'm going to try to show a little presentation if I can. Let's see. You have disabled the screen sharing.
All right, try again.
Just didn't want any long-winded presentations, I think is what.
No, we do, Mike. Got it.
There we go. Everybody see that?
Sure can.
All right. As said, I'm the executive director here at St. John's River Water Management District. And as he mentioned, with that 1990, or as kids, I guess these days are calling it the late 1900s, is when I started with the district as an engineer one in our regulatory programs, and kind of worked my way through, worked in actually most of the areas of the district. I've worked in our consumptive use permitting. I've worked in our environmental resource permitting. I led those groups during a time. I've also led some of our administrative groups and our environmental science groups, and most recently, as you mentioned, was over the water supply planning and the modeling and that. So I'm excited now to have the opportunity to kind of lead the agency. You know, our 4 core missions, I'm sure everybody's probably aware of these: water supply, flood protection, you know, water quality, and protection of natural systems. And we really have challenges in each one of these areas. Water supply, Florida's been blessed with reliable, cheap, very cheap, abundant water supply by being able to just, you know, stick a pipe down into the upper Florida aquifer and pump with a very little treatment. And so, you know, we're a lot more blessed than a lot of the country, but we're reaching the end of when that's able to be done without having to really look closely at what kind of environmental impacts may be occurring. And so I'll go a little bit into our water supply planning for the area. Water quality wise, everybody's aware of the water quality issues that we're having in the state of Florida, and the Indian River Lagoon, and all the impaired water bodies that we have. And so, you know, we're doing some work to do that. I'll touch just a little bit on that. And I think that'll be enough to bore y'all to tears by the end of the presentation. For those of you that don't know, we're statutorily required to do water supply planning at the district, and we do a 20-year plan. So we've broken our district up into 3 regions, and this area is the Central Florida Water Initiative region, and it covers areas of both our district, South Florida District, and Southwest District. So collaboratively, we're looking together to look 20 years into the future, basically, to see what those water needs are going to be, and then do an evaluation of what the impacts of utilizing traditional sources is going to be, and whether or not that can be sustained. So those of you may not know, the water management districts were actually delineated based on surface water boundaries, because it was really looking at you know, the St. Johns River and other defined surface water basins, and groundwater doesn't really follow or respect those lines whatsoever. And so it's really become necessary for us to work together, and that's what, you know, the Central Florida Water Initiative is kind of all about. It's a collaborative effort between the 3 districts and, you know, all our stakeholders: DEP, agriculture, public supply, and the environmental community and businesses, to make sure that we identify sustainable sources of water. You know, not just groundwater, but enough water to meet all those demands, so that we can support both the economic growth that we're trying to achieve here in the state, and protect those precious water resources. That is one of the reasons everybody wants to move to Florida. So that's kind of what we're looking at within that area. Here's a graph of the water use that we're anticipating when we do that prediction. And overall demands are projected to increase by about 36%, to a little over 900 million gallons a day by 2040. Even though the population is supposed to increase about 49%. So we are, you know, increasing less than our population, and that's through the efforts of conservation, reuse, things like that. This area does a really good job of using their wastewater beneficially. And so, but our challenge is to look at that demand and then look at the constraints that we have. And in this area, especially, we have some significant water resources there, We have the Wekiwa and the Wekiwa springs, some outstanding Florida springs, Rock Springs, another outstanding Florida springs. These are just showing kind of all the minimum flows and levels that have been established within the area. And you can see that some of them are under the current evaluation not being met or projected to not be met in the near future. And so for our area of the district, these were kind of the primary constraints when we were looking at the water supply and determining how much it could be used by these traditional sources. We also looked at wetlands within the area, which is a little bit more complicated analysis. But it's not just MFL water bodies, it's also, the general water resources of the area that we take a look at. When we did that, based on the modeling efforts that we do, and we have a regional groundwater flow model that covers this in a much larger area, kind of coast to coast, so that we don't have any boundary conditions. It kind of set the limit at around 760 million gallons a day as to what we could pull from that upper Florida aquifer without causing significant harm to these water bodies. And so the trouble is that, if you look down at the projected demand, this has 855, but I think it's gone up a little bit to around 900 or so million gallons a day. Or actually it's 855 of groundwater, the 908 is all sources of water. And you see that we have some water to make up. And if you look, another complication is if you look at the permitted groundwater allocation that you have down there, that's even higher. So we've issued more permits than can be utilized. So something had to be done in order to make sure everybody had that reliable source of water, but that we weren't going to impact our water resources adversely. And that's where these project options that we have listed in here come up. We don't just say how little you can use, and we don't just say, this is what you got to make up. We also work with all of our stakeholders and partners to develop project options that are available. And we have over 500 million gallons a day in project options that are available for them to choose from, or other alternatives that they may come up with in order to meet those demands. And these are just some of the strategies that we have kind of listed out by county. Surface water is one that Seminole County is kind of already kind of looked ahead and done a good job of looking at alternative water supplies, and they're actually already permitted to take some surface water to make up and meet their needs. But we're looking at developing other projects. The cost is fairly significant to do these, and we want to partner with the groups to do that. That's one of the reasons behind our cost share program that we have. And since 2014, we funded about 109 projects here, developing almost 60 million gallons a day in alternative water supply, conserving over 5 million gallons a day. And there's also added benefits to this of nitrogen and phosphorus reduction. And so a lot of these projects that we do not only have water supply benefits, but they also have nutrient benefits. And so with these projects, we've reduced loading, to the water bodies by almost 150,000 pounds a year of nitrogen and almost 100,000 pounds a year of phosphorus. And so it's a good program that we want to keep to it.
And Mike, just in case not everybody may be aware of what that really means, that's really the impact to your water quality of your surface water bodies, and that's vitally important that you're reducing the nitrogen loading. So
a lot of our water bodies, right? A lot of our water bodies have had, through development that occurred prior to effective stormwater regulations, agriculture that didn't have the best management practices that they have in place now.
Yep.
So a lot of nutrients, have gotten into these water bodies and are the primary reason a lot of them are impaired. And so what we're doing is working, with the legislature, with local governments, with partners to develop projects that can, kind of do this diet and exercise program for these water bodies. We want to reduce the amount coming in, get that down, and then we also want to do some in water body projects. we've implemented in the area, like Lake Apopka, where we've done the marsh flowway to reduce the legacy nutrients that are in there. And so it's not something that we want to just wait and kind of see what happens after we reduce the loading going into it. We want to actively work to get these water bodies back to the shape that they were, prior to them being impacted. For the Central Florida Water Initiative, the next steps that are kind of going on in this area, we're right in the middle of revising and reevaluating the minimum flows and levels for the Wekiva Basin MFLs. And if you don't know what a minimum flow and level is, basically that's where we go out, take a look at the ecology of the area, take a look at what the needs are of that particular water body, and we determine, what is the limit that withdrawals can reach before they cause significant harm to that water body. So we're basically setting up what that constraint is for that particular water body before it's going to see harm as a result of that withdrawal. And we had MFLs on the books for some of those, but they were done with some different methods that we've updated, and we have a brand new groundwater model for the area that we want to utilize. And so we're in the process of reevaluating those. The district, from a legislative perspective, is actually on the hook for 25% of the recovery costs for the outstanding Florida springs in the area. So Wekiva Springs and Rock Springs in the area are two that we're going to play a big role in, along with all the partners that want to make sure that they continue to draw the tourists that they do. And then one of the things that happened with the Central Florida Water Initiative this time is they implemented new rules for the area. So before, you had permitting rules for consumptive use from our district, from South Florida, from Southwest. Now we have kind of a unified set of rules that not only give consistency for the area, but they also provide additional options that will be used to make sure that the resources aren't harmed in the area. And one of the requirements of that is that we modify all the permits in there. So now that the rules are effective, that they've been ratified by the legislature last year, and as a part of that ratification, there were some minor tweaks made to the rules. So DEP had to do a small rule change, which they just completed, and gone through all the noticing timeframes and all that. So it's effective. The CFWI rules are effective now. And the main things that really affect the area, like I mentioned before, we now have a uniform method for calculating gross and residential per capita. Before, there were some differences in the methods that we did it, so it was hard to compare. It's kind of apples and oranges with what we were comparing. And so for those of you that don't know that, that's gross per capita is basically, all your water use in an area divided by the population that is using it. So that's the amount, including commercial, industrial, including recreational, including all the other uses that might happen in that area to support that population, divided by that population. And then the residential is kind of what you would think it would be. That's the amount that people use in their houses outside of all the other water uses per person on an annual basis. There were also some requirements for power generation and mining and all that, just to make it consistent, where we're including a water balance to know how much water is actually leaving their site. And then we developed consistent efficiency standards for all irrigation systems for not only landscape and recreation, but also agriculture. The big thing, there's two really big parts that really affect the area. And that is, one, conservation. And you might remember back, one of our goals for meeting those future demands was 50 million gallons a day of conservation, reducing that demand by 50 million gallons a day. And one of the ways we do that is, we look at these per capita goals. And so we're setting some fairly ambitious goals of 115 gross and 100 functional. And functional is sort of like residential. That's where you get to kind of subtract some of the things that may make that utility have a higher gross than what it is. And so to try to compare apples and apples again, you know, we have some formulas in there that allow us to get down to closer to a residential, so that we set, and that's why it's a little bit lower than that. So those are some ambitious goals that they need to meet. They need to give us a conservation plan in order to do that. They're supposed to try to meet it by December 31st of 2023, but if they haven't met it by then, they basically kind of have to tell us why they weren't able to meet it, give us in 6 months, they have to give us a plan, and then every 10 years we check in to make sure that they're you know, making progress toward that plan. And that's what I'm talking about here, that they'll make progress toward the goal and submit an annual report every year on what they've done to try to get there. The other big one is, you remember back in that one slide where we set the limit of groundwater from the upper Floridan to 760. When you look at the projected demand out from the current demand, that we hit that number if we don't do anything else differently around 2025, and that's when some of the MFLs are starting to be broken. And so basically public supply, and the reason it's public supply is because about 90% of the increased use during that time period comes from public supply. So they're the ones that are the primary increase in use in the area. So they're limited basically to whatever that demonstrated 2025 demand. So when we look at what that projection is, that's all that they can, that's what their allocation from the upper Floridan groundwater aquifer. And that's important to remember, because we're not saying that they can't have additional water for growth. We're saying that that's the limit that can be pulled from the upper Floridan. And the upper Floridan is the one that is most impactful to, you know, withdrawals from that are most impactful to springs and to surface water bodies and things like that. And so that's why the limit was placed on that. So if they're above that, you know, they need to submit. In other words, if they need more water than that in the future, if that isn't their build out or whatever, they need to show us how they're going to get there. And, you know, the primary ways that people have is through alternative water supplies and conservation. We can give them temporary allocations. They can do offsets where they do recharge projects and things like that. We're actually doing that in our district now. We have some minimum flows and levels up near our headquarters, the Keystone Lakes, that have been impacted by pumping. And we're doing a big water resource development project where we're taking floodwaters from Black Creek, cleaning those waters up and putting it into the lake, which recharges the aquifer and benefits the lake. And the utilities in the area are participating by buying into that project and meeting their obligations through that. So it's a way that we've been able to partner with utilities, and you know, each of us have a stake in it so that they can meet their water demands and we can take care of the resources. The same thing will end up happening here. Later this year is when we should have the draft minimum flows and levels done for the Wekiva area. And that'll be kind of the driver, because, you know, basically what they have to, what we have to show, and this is another kind of finer point that's in the legislation, is when we do this modification, we calculate the 2025 demand, then it's up to the district. The burden is on the district to show that that demand, if exceeded by that utility or by that user, is going to cause a detrimental harm to whatever the water resource is that we're looking at. So it's not just a flat, you know, cut off no matter what. We do have to do some additional science, because there are some areas within the Central Florida Water Initiative where you could pull some more water and it's far enough away or a small enough amount that it wouldn't cause any additional impacts to these water bodies. So it's something that we'll be doing over the next couple of years to modify these permits. We'll be working very closely with the utilities to make sure that their water supplies demands are being met, but that the resources are protected. So that's the big thing that's kind of going on in water supply planning. Just briefly, because I know I've been going on for a little bit of time, something nearby there, we went out and kind of celebrated our Lake Jessup innovative algae harvesting project there at the district. And, this is all part of the $1.65 million funding from the efforts of our governor, Governor DeSantis, to do innovative technologies for cleaning up these harmful algal blooms as part of the algal bloom task force. And this is our board members and somebody from DEP that came, but we also had, Representative Smith was out there, Senator Broder, who's a great partner with us and really works hard to, get projects funded for the area to help improve these projects. Jay Zembauer and Andrea Herr were out there, Megan Sladek from City of Oviedo. So we had a lot of partners that were with us, and what this process basically does is it takes that algae, and you can see the 2 jars there that our board member and I are holding, and it goes in one side, all cloudy with all that green algae, and then it goes through these processes that they have and comes out the other side very clear. And so this is a test project to kind of see what the economics of it are and see how this could fit into an overall plan for cleaning up Lake Jessup. If it's something that needs to be scaled up or implemented in a different way. So we're evaluating this along with other ideas for this area in order to clean up Lake Jessup. We all know that it has its issues with algal blooms caused by all the nutrients that have been put into it. And the one kind of cool thing about this is the byproduct of the algae, they're actually looking for a market for it to actually be able to utilize it as a product. I think one of the things was actually tennis shoes, the soles of tennis shoes, they were able to use it for. So hopefully, as it comes along, some of these innovative things will have dual benefits of being able to clean our water bodies, but also provide, some profit potential for whatever the company, which will in turn lower the cost of cleaning up these water bodies.
And provide incentive to clean it up. That's great.
Right. Not just the incentive of making it clean, but also,
which should be enough, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all the partners that did that. That's really all I kind of have. If I'm happy to answer any questions. We are, as I mentioned before, we are in the, I was over the regulatory programs, and we did a kind of reformation of those programs back in 2012 to really kind of put the focus more on customer service, so that we really looked at our job as being the ones that help people through that permitting process. Not that we did anything different as far as the environmental result, but what we found was, if we worked hand in hand and helped people through the process, we got to that good environmental result much easier than just having conflict over it from the start. So we've had a lot of staff changeover in our regulatory program, and we've had a lot of increase in permits in that. But that's one of the areas that I'm going to be focusing on, is trying to make sure that they have the appropriate number of staff so that they can continue to provide that level of service. I think we just got a little out of whack with the number of permits coming in and the number of staff that we had working on them. And so we want to still be able to provide, that quality work, but also that good customer service, so that people, can get through that process as painlessly as possible. So that's one of the things we'll be working on that'll affect this area also. So if anybody has any questions or wants me to talk about anything else, I'll do my best.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, I've got a quick question. What is the district view as kind of the best way for businesses to be able to assist in the reduction of usage right now? Because obviously many of our businesses rely on continued growth of the area and want that to continue to happen, but also understand that hey, we've got to reduce water consumption and be smart about our water consumption if we're going to smartly see that happen.
Primary, one of the things, we have our Florida Water Star program here at the district that we share with Southwest, and we kind of partner together with them and some others to implement. making sure that we're taking every advantage, especially with new construction and new areas, to have things be as water efficient as possible from a conservation standpoint. Be accepting of alternative water supplies. I know it's a difficult thing, but one of the things that we'll be moving toward here eventually will be direct potable use. And so, they do it in a lot of other areas of the country, and they do it on the space station. And so, being able to use that rather than to have to go through the process of cleaning it up enough so that you can recharge it in the ground and then pulling it back out of the ground, there's some waste and some cost involved in that, to where it wouldn't take a lot more to clean it up to where it could just be used from a potable standpoint. And so, one of the things we got to work on is public acceptance toward that.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of development, thinking about development from, how it can least impact the system as it is. And I know in certain areas of the Wekiva Basin, we have rules in place that require maintenance of the recharge. And so, one of the things we got to think about is how that cycle works. And so we're pulling a certain amount of water out, the water going back in, it's either water we overuse with irrigation, or it's rainfall, and everything that isn't lost to evapotranspiration. And so if we pave over all the areas that have the capability of providing that local recharge, without thinking about it, what that ends up doing is having the water be shifted to where it eventually goes out to tide and doesn't have the opportunity to be recharged into our aquifer and reused again, and go through that natural cleanup process to where we're able to reuse it again. So, us making sure that when we actually do development, that we develop in a smart way, so that if you are developing a piece of land that has that recharge capability, you can do it in a way where you maintain that, whether it's using pervious pavement, whether it's ensuring that you're doing true retention to where it goes into the ground, things like that. Developing smart. We know a lot more now than we did before when we were developing without rules and regulations. And so, thinking about those kind of things as we expand. It's not that we're out of water. And that we're not going to, that growth is going to be held up by, a lack of water in Florida. It's just that we're out of this incredibly cheap water that we had before, that we were blessed with. And so it's not going to be that it's a cost that I think will inhibit, additional development or anything. It'll just be, a little bit more expensive than what we've had in the past. But Florida is in no means, anywhere close to being out of water. It's just, it's going to take a little more treatment, and it's going to take utilizing some alternative water supplies to meet those demands. Yeah.
I mean, your point about getting to the point where the public is accepting of direct potable reuse, which I don't know if everybody understands what that means. Just to be clear, I'll just say it. I'll say what everybody else doesn't want to say, which is toilet to tap.
I was waiting on the toilet to tap.
I mean, we essentially do it right now. We just put it back in the ground and then pull it back out later again. So it's just
in some areas, it actually just goes into a canal, goes a few feet down the road, and then it's pulled out of that canal. So I mean, I mean, we're actually doing it now. It's just we're able to tell ourselves, in the back of our heads that it's not being done, and everywhere else is similar situations. All the ones where they dispose of it to the river and pull it back out, and those kind of things. So
and we have ways of treating it, and I think it's an option that is being considered by the legislature, has been considered by the legislature, and I think you're right that getting the public to kind of understand the treatment process and how well it's treated and what's kind of going on is going to be important to ensuring if people don't want to have their water bills increase drastically, that needs to be an option on the table.
Well, that's a pretty common practice, though, in many other cities.
Right, and Altamont Springs, has a project in place where they're doing some treatment. Daytona Beach has did a demonstration project for it. JEA has done a pretty extensive pilot project where they were actually evaluating the different technologies to see which worked best for them. And I know in their capital improvement plan that they have. It's in there. Potable reuse is one of the things that's in there.
Yep.
So I think we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of people, being okay with it. Yeah,
getting over
accepting of it.
themselves. Yeah.
Getting over the yuck factor.
No, I don't. It's really just about how you communicate with people, and when you tell them it's safe and it's used elsewhere, and you have those case studies to prove to them that it's perfectly fine, they'll move on. I think once they get over it's going to cost you more and it's safe, and we have these case studies behind us, people will accept it.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mike? Dan.
Mike, I mean, this is definitely out of my element. So if I'm incorrect on any of this, please, just say so. But it's my understanding that the parameter that was used for water usage per family has just recently been updated. I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but I think it used to be, the old standard was like 360 gallons per household, and now it's dropped to like 230. And I don't remember the exact number. What effect is that having on the future planning of water conservation and that type of thing in the future? Is that insignificant? And to me, I think it's a huge victory, and it probably has a lot to do with the different types of water conservation steps that have been put in place over the last few decades. But where can we get to without it placing unreasonable, or limiting access to the consumer to water?
Right. So that was the goals that I mentioned in there, or the goals for water conservation, or for that per person water use that you're kind of talking about. And the residential part of that, that's called functional in there, but it's getting closer to residential because you take out a lot of the other, you're able to subtract some of the commercial uses and some of the other things, was 100 gallons per person per day is kind of the goal that they're shooting for. That has been shown to be achievable. Those goals have shown to be achievable in areas, and that's what DEP and the districts really kind of looked at, because what we didn't want to do is set some unreasonable goal, that nobody could ever meet. But we also wanted it to be a stretch goal that, required, people to actually do something in order to get there. And so those are doable. I can remember a long time ago, numbers like 300 gallons per person per day were around. 150 is kind of what we had been shooting for when we were looking at CUPs, is something to kind of look to go for, and they've lowered that for this area. Meeting those, by far the cheapest way usually to take care of that future demand is to make sure that demand doesn't actually materialize. So if you can do conservation, especially with new types of development, eventually we're going to have to look at, what the typical lots look like in Florida. Are these big lawns that are irrigated with high volume irrigation that take up the majority of the lot something that needs to happen in Florida? Or is it something that should be more limited in the design, either from, not necessarily a regulatory standpoint, but just from, a conscientious, smart development standpoint? You can develop a lot, even large lot areas, in ways that use a tremendous range of water in order to keep them. And the more you have that high volume water, the higher that use is going to be. Over 50% of the potable water that's used, in the areas is used for outdoor irrigation. And so right there, if you start looking at, if we start chipping away at that, well, if you chipped away at it all completely, you've doubled your water use, capabilities without doing a single thing. Well, that's probably not reasonable, but, are there things that we can look at as ways of conserving that water that might be more that will be more cost effective and less impactful, than developing some of these big water resource development projects or alternative water supply projects. Using the water that we are already using a little bit smarter is one way that we can do things more cheaply and more efficiently.
Yeah.
Which are we doing better? Are we handling our water usage better right now, or or is there more improvement on how we're handling the wastewater?
Well, we continue that, so the per capita rate continues to go down, and it shows that we are handling our water much better. As an overall group, as our overall area, the utilities and the residents and everybody have been making progress toward using water more efficiently and effectively, and making better use of our reclaimed water. In this area especially, there's a lot of beneficial reuse. That's not the case everywhere within the state. The recent Senate bill that went into legislation that requires all of the surface water disposals of wastewater to be eliminated, is going to be a big driver that can really help with the water supply, because they're going to have to find ways that they can dispose of that. And what we want to do is work with the utilities that have those issues, make sure that we can do that in a beneficial way, because you could dispose of it other than go in the river by going deep well injection, where it's kind of gone forever, or you can do other things. So I think, looking at opportunities to partner, looking at opportunities to look at it kind of from a big picture standpoint, and not just to take care of the waste stream standpoint, but let's see how we can take care of that in a way that benefits the other side of the equation, where we're trying to make more water. I think it's going to be really important. We've come a long way in conservation. We've really improved in that. There's still room to go. Obviously, it gets harder the tighter you get, but I think there's still room for improvement in the water conservation, and there's definitely room for improvement in the way that we handle our wastewater. If you look at it, as a state as a whole, and I think we are making good strides in that in order to do that. And I think, the legislature and, Jason Broder has been a good friend of the environment and doing that down in your area. But you can see that they've been active the last few years in providing funding for all of these kind of key components: water quality improvements, alternative water supplies, wastewater improvements, things like that. And so, the continuation of that and the continuation of us kind of, like I said, collectively working together instead of working against each other to reach these goals, I think is going to be critical to us achieving them.
Thank you.
I have a question about the calculation. Are you just doing an average of households, or are you weighting them and looking at them at number per household? Because it sounds like similar to a tax situation where people with in a single family household, they end up getting I don't know what you want to use the word, penalized, versus being in a family situation.
So it's not like a compliance measurement for anybody in particular. It's more a tool that's used to have data about how water is used in either a community or in a big area. And so that's why it's a little broader. They actually try to get fairly detailed data from not only the census, but Bieber there at the University of Florida. And then we have good records from the utilities and the water suppliers about how much water is being provided. And so it's not looked at on necessarily an individual household by household basis, but it is looked at both collectively for an area, but also, there's work being done to kind of identify it at almost a parcel level, to where you can target then your water conservation. And that's the goal of doing that is, if overall you're at 160, but you see some that are down around 90 or 80, in some areas, dependent upon how they've developed. And then you see some at 300. Well, targeting the water conservation at the ones that are 300 is probably a better tactic than trying to get them, to go from 90 to 80, in this other. And so it's both a measurement and a metric of how we're doing, and it's a tool that we are starting to realize can be utilized, not only us, but the utilities, at how to target our conservation measures at the areas that make sense, where there's still some low-hanging fruit to do that. But it's not like somebody's penalized individually. The only way, and one of the other things,
with the price increases, though.
Well, one of the other things that helps with it is that structured price. The more water that you use, if you stair step it,
tiered pricing.
Right, that makes sense.
Tiered pricing.
Yep.
That it gets to be more expensive, and there are limits to the effectiveness of that. And so the utilities are much better, at kind of figuring out where that spot is that encourages conservation versus, penalizing people or causing it so somebody decides to put in their irrigation well. I mean, that's one of the big things that we still have in some of the areas, is people having the ability to, kind of put in their own well that's exempt from everything. And so if you go too far, then they say, well, I'm just going to put in my own well, and then it's much harder to kind of get at that. So it's a balancing act. Really, to me, it's the important part is the education and the behavior change. I mean, it's very hard, even though you can do it, to regulate, and put rules and things out there to get people to change behavior. It can be done and all, but a lot of times it can be much more effective if we just really educate them on the need for why you need to worry about conserving water, why you need to worry about where your pollution's going, and show them that connection of the everyday activities they have to the impacts on the environment and, to the cost of providing water for people, for these expansions of businesses and things like that. And so one of the things we are working on here is to really kind of up our game a little bit on some of our outreach and education and programs, to work toward, making sure people have that information that they need when they're making decisions about, how they're expanding or what they're doing in their everyday life about it. And I think with all that combined, we can continue to drive water use in the right direction on a per person basis, so that it makes it so that we can have a cheaper alternative for the continued growth that everybody's kind of looking for and needs to support the population that's coming into the state every day. I mean, that's part of what we got to plan for, is we've got such an attractive state that people are still flocking to it to get here. So we need to make sure we can accommodate that.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else have any questions? I had one additional comment that I think folks should be aware of, and Mike, please feel free to chime in. When I'm working with customers on a high bill they might have, I help our company deal with the public service complaints and things like that come in, public service commission complaints. So occasionally when I have to deal with one of those, people wonder, why do they have high bills? It's typically from irrigation usage, right? You use too much water on your grass, you use more than the county may allow, or the St. John's Water Management District recommends, and trying to help them work through that process of understanding how much water actually gets used when you irrigate your lawn, versus just normal household use. Like, a lot of people more than double their household use just by irrigating regularly. And then also, in my opinion, the bigger change that needs to happen, not only on an individual level, but is almost more at like a homeowners association level, like these homeowners associations that require you to have your lawn super green all the time, that's a real problem. That's a lot of water use. Like my lawn is kind of greenish right now. This time of year, you shouldn't be using a lot of water. The grass is shouldn't be requiring that much water. If you're putting in St. Augustine and you're putting in high water stuff that requires a ton of water all the time, it's going to be a problem. So yeah, I just, the homeowners association stuff drives me a little crazy because I think you're creating expectations for your neighborhood that are unrealistic and creating further problems for water conservation in the future.
Well, and unnecessary, because you can make a very attractive, high quality landscaping, without having to have St. Augustine that is, watered to the hilt and all that. It takes a little bit more creativity, but, using, Florida native plants and using your green spaces wisely so that they're, portions so that they're not the vast majority of where you're trying to irrigate, or going with something like Bahia that you just don't irrigate and it's green when it's green and it dries up and then it turns right back green again. That's what I have in my yard, to where when it stops raining it turns a little brown, but when it rains it pops right back up and it's green again. So it's that changing perceptions, changing behaviors, changing expectations, of people. And, the homeowners associations has been, something that we've seen struggles with. I think they did finally pass a thing where they couldn't prohibit, you from doing Florida friendly landscaping, but they still have a lot. I remember we had a lady on our street back when I lived in Gainesville for a while that wanted to basically kind of landscape her whole thing with bushes and planting beds and things like that, and didn't want any grass in front because she was an older lady that didn't want to be responsible for mowing and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the homeowners association actually came after her when she did it, and they made her put a 6-inch strip of St. Augustine, right along the curb, because that was the what they could make her do. And so, changing what's acceptable to people and changing what good looks like, I think is a place where we can make progress.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Really appreciate your time. It was very educational and hopefully continues to make a difference. And we appreciate your good work you do for the St. John's Water Management District. Good luck with your confirmation and your time spent with the legislature this session.
Thank you.
I think we can all here appreciate that.
I will be back up there next week, knocking on doors. So
all right.
Me and Adam will be dragging me around everywhere. So thank y'all for the opportunity. Anytime, I'm happy to come back and talk about whatever issue it is y'all want to discuss.
Sounds great. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
I hope you all enjoyed that. I thought that was pretty helpful. I know we had Dr. Shortell come in, I think it was a couple of years ago now. But I think with those coming consumptive use permit changes, I think it's something that people really need to be aware of. I know it's something that as a utility we're concerned about. Just in terms of getting the use down to where it needs to be so that we're appropriately scaling for the growth that's going to continue to happen in the area for all the awesome businesses that are around. How did this 9 o'clock timeframe work? It seemed to work out okay for everybody.
Great.
Yeah, I liked it. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, me too. I was able to walk my son to school this morning, so that was nice. Oh, good, Kyle. I'm glad it worked out for you as well.
The chamber doesn't even open till 9 on Fridays. It's our little bit later morning, so I was thrilled.
Good. Is there anything else that anybody wants to hear about in the future? I know obviously session's going to be going on for the next couple of months, so we probably won't kind of dig into what happened during session until probably March or April, but is there anything else that's kind of on people's minds that they'd love to hear people talk about?
Hey, Chris, I think some of the regional transportation efforts might be something good to touch on, whether it's I-4 Beyond the Ultimate or where we are with the I-4 process right now. I think it would be relevant to touch on that a little bit.
Awesome. Great suggestion. Thank you, Elizabeth. Anybody else have any?
Just as an update, I know we spent a lot of time on the last few meetings in developing our legislative platform. Maybe an update of where we stand with that, who's delivered it and to whom, and what action items do you want this committee to take?
There's nothing to take anymore. It was delivered in December because we had the legislature started meeting this week in January. So Rebecca, maybe you can talk a little bit about how that was received by the executive committee. And
yeah, I can go over, I'll go over just a couple things. So the executive committee did review it at our meeting in December, and it passed on the executive committee level. The end of this month, it will go to the full board just for their final stamp of approval. That is in 2 weeks, I believe. And then, we're assuming that that will pass unanimously. We'll then run that to our full membership in the email the next morning, our Friday email. It is already in Tallahassee with some people, just because I know some executive committee members are actually in Tallahassee right now that already have copies of it, but there were no questions from the executive committee. They were very happy with all the work you guys had done. And, I expect to see it pass easily in the board in 2 weeks.
Great. Glad to hear that.
Thank you, guys. I know that that's always a lot of work each year. So
I feel like we were a little too slow this year moving. I think we probably should have started a little earlier, given kind of the time frame it took and knowing when session started in January. Because if it still hasn't passed full board and we're already into session now, maybe that's just something to think about for the future, that we got to start a little earlier. Maybe we got to start in like September or something for those early session years.
It's always hard on those election years when session starts right after the holidays. It's tight.
Yeah. Yep. So good to know for the future. Yeah. Hey, Elizabeth.
Another idea, and I apologize if it's been covered before, but perhaps an update on redistricting, what the county maps look like, the legislative districts look like. I know the county maps have been submitted, but it might be neat to see kind of how the chips are falling for all of that.
Yeah, would you be okay with that kind of post session? That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, based on what I'm being told, there is going to be quite a bit of discussion on some of those maps throughout session. So I would suggest waiting until they're actually finalized, because I do know that the congressional maps are up for debate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so if that, we'll plan on covering. I think that's a really good one, Elizabeth. We covered that kind of pre-session, but going back and talking about how, what changes were made in session and how it's going to affect everybody and how it affects Seminole County. I think it is a great discussion to have post-session, and I think it's probably worth having its own meeting about, because I think there's going to be some substantial changes, not only in some of the congressional districts we talked about statewide, like the new seat likely being over in the kind of Lakeland area, but also some of the changes that could happen in Central Florida, particularly with currently Stephanie Murphy's seat and her not running for re-election, and Val Demings running for Rubio's seat in Senate, so opening up a House seat. There's just a lot of changes in Central Florida that are happening this congressional cycle. So I think that'll be really good to revisit that post-session and see where things are. Obviously, with judicial happenings going to happen anyway after the fact, but yeah, that's a good one. Thank you, Elizabeth.
And Chris, just an FYI, this is on a smaller scale, but the 5 districts within Seminole County proper has already been approved by the school board and the county commission. So there were some slight changes, but if anybody needs to look at that, immediately, I'm sure they could find that information online.
Yeah, and that's kind of more of what I was talking about, or the local districts as opposed to the state and the federal until we get to that point, because I know that the county maps have already been approved and some of the local districts. So,
okay, yeah, that would be good. Okay. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order?
Can I do a couple chamber announcements?
Please.
So I'm not usually here, but Ben wasn't able to jump on today. So I'll thank you guys for letting me pop in. Two quick reminders. Next month, we're starting our DE&I series. If you guys haven't checked that out, it is going to be every Wednesday in February. It's a 4-part series, and each week builds on the other. It's very different from the traditional DE&I programs. So even if you've taken one, I encourage you to think about joining us. It's very interactive, and it's very focused on learning from everybody else in the room and their experiences. So it's going to be a great program. There will be certificates of completion for everyone afterwards, if that's something that your HR department likes to see you do. And then the other thing, I know July seems far away, but it's Hobnob year. I'm going to drop the sponsorship package in the chat. I already have 4 sponsorships that are sold, but if you guys are interested in sponsoring, please let me know. Or if you're interested in being on that Hobnob committee, Nathaniel will start meeting with volunteers the end of this month, beginning of next month, to start looking at that event. So we need lots of help from the issues committee. So let me know if you have any questions on those.
Will do. Thank you. That's a great event. Looking forward to it.
It should be interesting this year.
And have the emails on kind of the sign up emails already gone around for the DEI event next month?
It is on our website.
Okay.
If you just go to the chamber calendar, sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to send that directly to you. Now it's to everybody. The DE&I is on every Wednesday in February. So you just sign up on that first Wednesday is where you sign up there. And that fee, it's $65 for all 4 weeks. So when you just have to register on the first one. And it includes lunch.
Great. Awesome. That's all in person.
I don't know what the DE&I stands for. So
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, thank you.
So, and if you were at Good Morning Seminole last week, it kind of gave you a little bit of a sneak preview. Arnold was one of our speakers, and he's leading the program. He actually travels all over the US and does it. And he draws on a lot of his FBI background training. So it's very interesting.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, we've done some of that internally over the past couple of years, and it's fascinating just to hear people's viewpoints and to really learn what different perspectives we really come at different things with. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Rebecca.
Of course.
If nobody has anything else, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
thank you.
Enjoy the long
Have a nice
weekend.
day.
Get one.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.